I never thought I would find myself in a situation like this, sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall and questioning everything about my life. My name is Jason, and I've been married to Sarah for over 10 years. We have a 7-year-old son, Ethan, who is the light of my life. Everything seemed perfect in our little suburban bubble, until it was. It started with small things. Sarah began to come home late from her trips to the gym, claiming she was socializing with some new friends. At first, I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just a phase. I'd get more time to watch the game on television without her nagging me to take out the trash. Then there were the nights she'd tell me she had a late meeting at work. I knew she worked in marketing and that sometimes things got hectic, but it felt like she was saying it more often. One night, while I was cleaning up the kitchen, I found a stray number on a crumpled piece of paper. It wasn't in Sarah's handwriting, and when I confronted her about it, she laughed it off, saying it was just an old number from a friend. I wanted to believe her, but my gut started to twist. I began to pay closer attention, looking for signs, and what I found was a huge red flag. The final straw came on a Saturday afternoon when I dropped Ethan off at baseball practice. The coach, a guy named Tom, a charismatic, fit man in his late 30s. I had always thought he was a bit too friendly with the parents, but I never thought much about it until I saw Sarah sitting in the bleachers, laughing a little too hard at one of his jokes. My instincts kicked in. I stood around the corner, watching. I noticed how she leaned in closer, her laughter ringing out, while I sat alone in the car, my heart racing. Something didn't feel right. Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, I decided to confront her. "Hey, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How was practice today?" She rolled her eyes, dismissing me. "It was fine, Jason. Why do you care?" Her tone was sharper than usual, but I pressed on. "I saw you with Tom. You seemed to be having a lot of fun." Her expression changed. For a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of something, fear maybe. Then it was gone, replaced by a defensive wall. "Don't make a big deal out of nothing. We're just being friendly," she replied, brushing me off. But I could see she was lying. I felt anger bubbling inside of me, but I held it in, not ready for a full explosion. A few days later, while cleaning out the basement, I stumbled across an old laptop, dusty, forgotten. I brought it upstairs and plugged it in, hoping to find some forgotten photos or documents. Instead, I found something else: emails. I was hesitant to read them, but curiosity got the better of me. What I read was a gut punch: flirting, plans to meet up, and finally, confirmation of an affair. Sarah was sleeping with Tom. My heart sank. I felt like I had been hit by a freight train. I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying the moments we had shared, the years we had built together, and the image of our family. Each memory felt tainted. I felt betrayed. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed to confront her, to get answers, to hear the truth from her own lips. The day of the confrontation felt surreal. I approached her as soon as she walked in from work, my heart in my throat. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging within me. She looked at me, surprised but not worried. "What is it?" she asked, her tone casual. I could see her shield go up, and I knew she sensed the tension. "I know about you and Tom," I said, watching her expression change from confusion to defiance. "I read the emails, Sarah. You can't deny it anymore." Her response was immediate and defensive. "You have no right to invade my privacy. This is ridiculous." I could see she was angry, but underneath that anger was fear. I felt a sense of power in that moment. "I deserve the truth. You've been lying to me," I shot back, my frustration spilling over. As she struggled to come up with excuses, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. The emotional impact was crushing. How could she do this to us, to Ethan? Sarah stumbled through her explanations, how it was just a fling, how she was unhappy in our marriage, how this was all my fault. I wanted to scream. I was filled with rage, hurt, and disbelief. But I also felt something else, a determination to take control of the situation. I couldn't let this betrayal slide. I had to do something. As the realization settled in, I knew I had to think of a plan, a way to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. In that moment, as she stood there lying through her teeth, I made my decision. I would not only confront Tom, I would take action. My goal wasn't just revenge. It was to ensure that she felt the weight of her choices in a very real way. This was just the beginning. After the confrontation with Sarah, I was filled with a mix of anger and determination. The shock of her betrayal had turned from disbelief into a burning desire to take control of the narrative. I felt like a soldier ready for battle, and the first step was to gather evidence and strategize. For the next few days, I put my plan into action. I started by digging into the details of Sarah's affair with Tom. I had his contact information from the emails, but I needed proof. I began monitoring her phone calls and messages. I knew it was wrong, but the feeling of betrayal outweighed any guilt I might have felt. I needed to know the extent of this affair. My heart raced every time her phone buzzed, and I would try to catch glimpses of the screen whenever I could. The more I uncovered, the more enraged I became. I found texts filled with innuendo and sweet nothings that made my stomach churn. "Can't wait to see you later," one read. "You make me feel alive," said another. It felt like a dagger to my heart, and I was determined to make them pay for this. The more I pieced together their secret, the clearer my path became. One night after Sarah went to bed, I decided to confront Tom directly. I had a plan. I was going to show up at one of Ethan's practices. I wanted Tom to see me, to know who he was messing with. I marked the day on my calendar, circling it multiple times, building up the anticipation until I could hardly sleep. The day arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. I packed my things and made my way to the baseball field, determined to face Tom. As I arrived, I could see Sarah sitting on the bleachers, a wide smile on her face, entirely oblivious to my plans. My heart pounded in my chest as I spotted Tom laughing with the kids, his charismatic charm on full display. The sight of him made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my resolve. I approached the field, trying to keep my composure. When Tom noticed me, his smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of recognition passing over his face. I could see he was trying to gauge whether I was there for a friendly chat or something more sinister. "Tom," I called out, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling within me. He approached, feigning nonchalance. "Jason, right? Ethan's dad." "Yeah, that's me," I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Mind if I have a word with you?" "Sure, what's up?" he replied, his casual demeanor grating on my nerves. I led him to the edge of the field, away from prying eyes. "Listen, I know about you and Sarah," I began, keeping my tone even. "This little game you're playing, it's over. You need to back off." He looked taken aback, his surprise evident. "What are you talking about?" he stammered, and I could see the facade cracking. "Don't play coy with me," I shot back, my anger rising. "I've seen the messages, Tom. I know exactly what you've been doing." His bravado faltered. "Look, man, it's not what you think." "No, it's exactly what I think. You're messing with my family, and it's not going to fly. I'm going to make sure you're held accountable for this." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "Just stay away from Sarah and Ethan. If I see you at practice or anywhere near them again, I'll take this further." I leaned in closer, my voice low and menacing. "I've got enough evidence to ruin you. Don't test me." Tom's expression shifted, the cockiness vanishing. I could see he understood the gravity of the situation. "You don't want to do this, man," he said, his voice shaky. "Oh, I absolutely do." I stepped back, satisfaction surging through me as I watched him digest my words. I turned and walked away, feeling like I had just won a small battle in the war that was my life. Returning home, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Confronting Tom had been empowering, but I knew there was still much to be done. Sarah was still in the picture, and I needed to figure out how to handle her. My next step was to gather more evidence to ensure I had a solid case if it came down to custody battles or divorce. I started documenting everything: dates, times, messages, even the moments when she would come home late or forget to tell me about meetings. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting my son and ensuring I could provide him with a stable environment. But as I delved deeper into this dark hole, I realized I was becoming obsessed. It was more than just a response to her betrayal. It was consuming me. I began isolating myself from friends and family, pouring all my energy into this plan. I didn't want to be the victim anymore. I wanted justice, and I was willing to go to great lengths to achieve it. As days turned into weeks, I felt my emotional state teetering on the edge. I had moments of deep sadness, thinking about the family I thought I had. But each time I felt that sorrow creeping in, I would remind myself of Sarah's betrayal and the resolve I had to protect my son. I couldn't let my emotions win this fight. It was clear that this was just the beginning. I needed to stay focused and keep my eye on the prize. But with each passing day, I felt the weight of my decisions bearing down on me. The desire for revenge was strong, but so was the fear of what it might cost me in the end. I had to be careful. I had to be smart. The stage was set for the next act in this drama, and I was ready to take my revenge. I just had to keep my emotions in check and stay one step ahead of Sarah and Tom. I had my sights set on the big picture. It was time to make my move. As I moved deeper into my plan, I became increasingly aware of the emotional toll this situation was taking on me. Every day felt like I was walking around in a fog, angry, betrayed, and laser-focused on my mission. I knew I had to maintain my composure, especially around Ethan. He was innocent in all of this and didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of my war with his mother. Despite the chaos in my life, I tried to keep up appearances. I still went to work, helped Ethan with his homework, and even managed to smile at Sarah during family dinners. It was a facade that I wore like armor, but inside I was seething. I needed to confront her again, but this time with a plan that would leave her reeling. I decided to gather more evidence of her infidelity. One night I sat in the living room long after Ethan went to bed, listening to the sounds of Sarah moving around the house. I could feel my heart racing as I anticipated her going to bed. Finally, I made my move. I took her phone from the kitchen counter, where she had left it charging, and quietly slipped into my office. With shaky hands, I unlocked her phone and started scrolling through her messages. What I found was even worse than I expected. More texts to Tom, but this time they were more explicit, plans for more than just emotional encounters. They were discussing meeting up when I was out with Ethan. I felt the bile rising in my throat as I read through their exchanges. The details of their affair were laid bare in front of me, and with each message my anger surged. They had crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. I snapped screenshots documenting everything. The more evidence I gathered, the more powerful I felt. I was going to use this against her in the most effective way possible. After a couple of days of gathering evidence, I knew it was time to confront her again. This time, I wanted to catch her off guard and make her feel the weight of her actions. I planned an evening when she would be home late from work, because she always was. I set everything up so that when she came home, I would be waiting for her in the living room, armed with the truth. When the door creaked open that evening, I was anxious but determined. Sarah walked in, her usual bright smile fading as she saw my serious demeanor. "What's wrong?" she asked, the feigned innocence dripping from her voice. "Have a seat, Sarah," I said, my tone firm. "I have something to show you." Her brows furrowed in confusion as she sat down, and I held my phone out towards her. "You think I wouldn't find out? You think you could just keep lying to my face?" I showed her the screenshots of her conversations with Tom. "Tell me again how this is just a friendly relationship," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling within me. The color drained from her face as she scrolled through the messages. "Jason, I can explain," she stammered, her eyes darting from the screen to my face, desperate for an escape. "There's no explanation that can justify this," I shot back, wanting her to understand the depth of her betrayal. "You've been lying to me, to Ethan, and I won't stand for it." She tried to play the victim, saying it was a moment of weakness, that she was unhappy with our marriage. "You never listen to me anymore, Jason. I've been feeling neglected," she pleaded, but her excuses fell flat. I could feel my heart racing, not from fear or doubt, but from a sense of empowerment. I had the upper hand now. "You made your choices, Sarah. You decided to betray me, and now you need to face the consequences." The confrontation escalated into a shouting match. She accused me of invading her privacy, of being controlling, while I countered that she had shattered the trust we built over the years. I was done being the passive husband, accepting the bare minimum. This was my breaking point, and I was ready to fight for what I believed was right. When the dust settled, Sarah was left speechless, tears streaming down her face. I could see the guilt washing over her as the reality of her actions hit her. I was no longer the husband who would just take the betrayal. I was a man ready to take action. "I've decided I want full custody of Ethan," I declared. Watching her reaction closely, her eyes widened in shock. "You can't be serious. You're going to take him away from me," she cried, her voice breaking. "This isn't about taking him away, Sarah. This is about what's best for him," I argued, feeling the weight of my words. "I can provide him a stable home without the chaos you've brought into our lives." The confrontation had taken a toll on both of us, but I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had a plan and I was determined to execute it. I knew the road ahead would be challenging, especially when it came to the legalities of custody battles, but I was ready to face whatever came my way. As the night wore on, Sarah continued to plead her case, but I had made up my mind. I wouldn't let her manipulate me with tears and empty promises anymore. The emotional impact of her betrayal was still raw, but I felt a surge of strength. The more I stood up to her, the more I realized that I was reclaiming my life. I knew that I'd have to gather more evidence for the custody battle ahead. I needed to be prepared for whatever tricks she might pull, but for now I felt a sense of newfound purpose. I was taking control of my life for the sake of Ethan and myself. The battle between Sarah and me had only just begun, and I was ready to fight for the future I wanted. I was determined to ensure that my son would grow up in a safe and loving environment, away from the toxicity of infidelity. The stakes had never been higher, and I was ready to play the long game. This time I wouldn't back down. I would ensure that justice was served. In the days that followed our confrontation, Sarah and I barely spoke. The air in our home was thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the betrayal that had shattered our once happy family. I was laser-focused on my plan, but I also felt the weight of my decisions pressing heavily on my heart. I had decided to seek full custody of Ethan, and I knew that meant a lengthy and challenging battle ahead. As I prepared for what was to come, I started researching the legalities of custody arrangements. I met with a lawyer who specialized in family law, explaining my situation in detail. The lawyer was supportive, but she was also realistic about the challenges I might face. "You'll need to build a strong case," she emphasized. "Documentation of Sarah's infidelity will be critical. We need to prove that you can provide a stable home for Ethan." I nodded, taking in her words. I had spent enough time documenting Sarah's actions, her late nights, the texts, the emails. It was time to take that evidence and turn it into a strategy. I made copies of everything, organizing it meticulously, and I felt a sense of empowerment as I pieced together my case. Meanwhile, my interactions with Ethan became even more crucial. I wanted to shield him from the storm brewing between Sarah and me. I made sure to spend quality time with him, playing catch, helping him with his homework, and reading bedtime stories. I knew that as long as I was present and attentive, I could provide him with some stability amid the chaos. During one of these evenings, as we sat on the floor building a Lego set, Ethan suddenly looked up at me. "Dad, are you and Mom fighting?" he asked, his innocent eyes searching mine. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, buddy, but we love you very much. That will never change," I reassured him, hopping to ease his fears. I felt a pang of sadness at the thought of the impact this situation was having on him. A few days later, Sarah and I had to meet to discuss the logistics of Ethan's schedule. I could see the tension still lingering between us as we sat down at the dining table. She attempted to act normal, but the forced smile and the way she fidgeted with her hands told me all I needed to know. She was just as rattled as I was. "Ethan has his school play coming up next week," she said, trying to sound casual. "We should figure out who will take him and what we should do afterward." I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. "I think it's important that we both be there for him. He deserves to see his parents supporting him, even if we're not on the best of terms." Her eyes narrowed slightly and I could see the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "You know, Jason, you don't have to be so dramatic about this. We can still co-parent, right? Co-parenting requires mutual respect, Sarah, and right now, I'm not sure we have that, I replied firmly. I'm doing what's best for Ethan, and if you can't see that, then I'm not sure how we'll manage this. She opened her mouth to respond, but I could tell she was struggling to find the right words. The truth was, I could feel her manipulation tactics creeping back in. She was trying to regain control, but I was having none of it. As we went back and forth, I realized that my resolve was stronger than ever. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into submission. I had seen firsthand how she had put her needs above our son, and I would do everything in my power to protect him. After a particularly tense discussion, I ended up leaving early, feeling drained. I knew I had to keep my emotions in check, especially around Ethan. That night, as I tucked him into bed, I watched him drift off to sleep, and I made a silent promise that I would fight tooth and nail for his happiness and security. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and preparations. I continued to meet with my lawyer, who helped me plan out the best approach for the upcoming custody hearing. She advised me to gather character references from friends and family who could vouch for my parenting abilities. It was a lot to juggle while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy at home. But as the hearing approached, I found myself spiraling into anxiety. The thought of facing Sarah in court, battling over our son, was almost unbearable. I kept replaying our arguments in my mind, her accusations, my anger, and the hurtful things we had said to one another. I needed to remain strong, but the emotional weight was heavy. One evening, while I was going over some documents in my office, I heard Ethan call out from his room. I rushed to his side, finding him sitting up in bed, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I had a bad dream," he said, his voice shaking. I sat down beside him, wrapping my arms around him. "It's okay, buddy, I'm here. It was just a dream," I whispered, trying to soothe him. As I held him close, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen slightly. In that moment, the weight of everything faded away, and all that mattered was being there for him. "Will everything be okay?" he asked, looking up at me with those innocent eyes that broke my heart. I forced a smile, wiping away his tears. "Yes, Ethan, everything will be okay. I promise," I said, my voice steady despite the uncertainty I felt inside. I couldn't let him doubt my commitment to him. I would do whatever it took to ensure that he would have a happy and stable life. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I dressed sharply, wanting to present myself as a capable and responsible father. I arrived at the courthouse early, packing in the waiting area as I mentally prepared myself for the battle ahead. When the time came, I stepped into the courtroom and the weight of the moment hit me. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was doing this for Ethan. I was ready to fight for my son, no matter the cost. I couldn't let Sarah's betrayal define my future or Ethan. As I took my seat, my heart raced with anticipation. I knew the stakes were high, but I was prepared to face whatever lay ahead. With my evidence in hand and a fierce determination in my heart, I was ready to fight for what was right. The hearing would set the course for our lives, and I was prepared to lay everything on the line to protect my son's future. The battle for custody had begun, and I was ready to give it my all. As I sat in the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The judge entered, and a hush fell over the room. I could feel my heart racing in my chest, and I reminded myself to breathe. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for, and I needed to stay focused. The proceedings began with my lawyer presenting the case. She laid out the evidence meticulously, detailing Sarah's infidelity, her neglect of our family, and the impact it would have on Ethan. I watched Sarah as she sat across the room, her expression fluctuating between anger and disbelief. She was wearing her poker face, but I could see the cracks forming as the reality of the situation began to settle in. When it was my turn to speak, I felt a surge of determination. I stood up, my voice steady as I addressed the judge. "Your Honor, I'm here today to fight for my son's well-being. I love Ethan more than anything in this world, and I want what is best for him." I could see the judge nodding, and I continued to outline how Sarah's actions had affected our family. I spoke about the late nights, the unreturned calls, and the emotional distance that had grown between us. I painted a picture of how Ethan deserved a stable and loving environment, one free from the chaos of his mother's choices. When I finished, my lawyer steered the conversation back to the evidence. She presented the texts and emails, showing the extent of Sarah's relationship with Tom. Each message displayed was like a dagger aimed at Sarah, and I could see her biting her lip, trying to suppress her emotions. Then it was Sarah's turn. I braced myself as her lawyer stood up, presenting her side of the story. Sarah tried to portray herself as the victim, claiming that our marriage had been strained for years. She spoke about how she had felt lonely and neglected, attempting to shift the blame onto me. "I was just looking for someone who understood me," she said, her voice trembling. My anger bubbled beneath the surface, but I reminded myself to keep a level head. I could see how desperate she was, how she was trying to manipulate the narrative. I knew I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her words distract me from the truth. The judge listened carefully, weighing both sides. I could see him taking notes, processing everything we presented. As the hearing continued, I felt a sense of urgency. This wasn't just about me or Sarah. It was about Ethan's future. I had to make it clear that I was the parent who could provide him with the love and stability he needed. After several hours of testimony and cross-examinations, the judge called for a recess. I sat with my lawyer, feeling drained and anxious. "You did well," she reassured me, "but we have to wait and see how the judge processes everything. Just remember, it's not over yet." As we waited for the hearing to resume, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What if the judge didn't see things the way I did? What if Sarah's manipulation worked? I watched other parents with their children in the waiting area, their laughter echoing in stark contrast to my turmoil. After what felt like an eternity, the judge returned to the bench and we resumed. I held my breath as he began to summarize the case. "I've listened to both sides carefully," he said, his voice steady. "This is a challenging situation with many factors to consider. The well-being of the child must come first." He turned to me, then to Sarah. "It's evident that both parents love Ethan deeply. However, the evidence presented raises serious concerns about the stability of his current living situation." My heart raced as I listened, knowing that these words could tip the scales in my favor. The judge continued, "Given the circumstances surrounding this case, it's clear that a change may be necessary to ensure Ethan's healthy development." My pulse quickened as I absorbed each word. After further deliberation, the judge announced his decision. "I am granting temporary custody to Jason with visitation rights for Sarah. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months." A wave of relief washed over me, mingling with disbelief. I had won. I felt as though a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I looked over at Sarah, whose face blanched as the reality of the situation sank in. She was furious, but I couldn't afford to dwell on her reaction. My focus was on Ethan and ensuring that he could thrive in a stable environment. As we exited the courtroom, I felt a mix of emotions, elation and apprehension. I had secured temporary custody, but I also knew that the battle wasn't over. Sarah wouldn't go down without a fight. I needed to prepare for the fallout, knowing that she could become even more desperate to regain control. When I got home, I found Ethan playing with his toys, blissfully unaware of the day's events. I knelt beside him, pulling him into a hug. "Guess what, buddy? You're going to be living with Dad full-time now," I said, my heart swelling with pride. "And love, really?" he exclaimed, his face lighting up. "That's awesome. Can we get ice cream?" I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Absolutely, ice cream it is." In that moment, the weight of the world felt a little lighter. I was doing this for him, and I would fight to make sure he never felt the pain of our broken marriage. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to notice Sarah's behavior becoming more erratic. She started showing up unannounced, trying to win Ethan over with extravagant gifts and promises. I could see the influence she was trying to exert, and it made me uneasy. I had to be vigilant. Ethan needed consistency and stability, not confusion. I consulted with my lawyer about Sarah's attempts to undermine my authority. "Document everything," she advised. "If she's trying to manipulate him or disrupt the stability you've created, that could work in your favor during the review." I took her advice seriously, keeping a detailed record of Sarah's interactions with Ethan. I wanted to ensure that if she continued down this path, her actions would reflect poorly in the next hearing. I wasn't going to let her undermine everything I had fought for. As I navigated the challenges of co-parenting, I also focused on building a strong bond with Ethan. We made a routine of spending quality time together, going to parks, playing baseball, and having movie nights. I wanted him to feel secure and loved, to know that he had a parent who was devoted to his happiness. But Sarah was not easily deterred. She became increasingly hostile, making veiled threats and disparaging remarks about me whenever I wasn't around. I wouldn't allow her to drag me into her drama. I had to remain focused on my son's well-being. One evening, after a particularly trying day, I sat on the sofa after putting Ethan to bed. I reflected on the journey I had taken and the pain I had endured. I had faced betrayal at its worst, but I had also discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. I was determined to keep pushing forward for the sake of my son. As I lay in bed that night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would not let Sarah's actions dictate my life. I had fought hard for my son's future, and I would continue to fight for him. With renewed purpose, I closed my eyes, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. It was time to prepare for the next round. As the weeks rolled on, I thought I had a grip on the situation, but I underestimated the lengths Sarah would go to reclaim her position as the primary parent. Her attempts to undermine my authority became increasingly aggressive. She would show up at my house unannounced, bringing Ethan gifts that I had explicitly told her not to purchase. I could see how confused he was becoming, oscillating between excitement for the new toys and anxiety about his changing family dynamics. One afternoon, while I was preparing lunch for Ethan, I received a call from my lawyer. "Jason, I have some concerning news. Sarah has filed a motion for primary custody, claiming that you are unfit due to your hostile behavior," she informed me. I felt my stomach drop. "She's trying to paint you as the bad guy. We need to prepare for her upcoming hearing." Panic surged through me. I knew that Sarah was trying to manipulate the system, and I had to act swiftly. I immediately began documenting every interaction I had with her, taking notes on her visits, her gifts, and her attempts to sway Ethan. I wanted to ensure that I had a solid case to present if it came down to it. When the day of the hearing arrived, I felt a mix of dread and determination. This was my chance to prove that I was the loving, devoted parent Ethan deserved, and I couldn't let Sarah's lies tarnish that image. I arrived at the courthouse early, my heart pumping as I mentally rehearsed what I wanted to say. As the hearing began, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Sarah's lawyer started with her opening statement, painting her as a nurturing mother who merely wanted to provide a stable home for Ethan. I felt my blood boil as they spun their tale, knowing it was built on deceit and manipulation. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and stood up, looking directly at the judge. "Your Honor, I'm here to protect my son. I've dedicated my life to ensuring that Ethan is happy, healthy, and safe," I began, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions within me. I presented the evidence of Sarah's erratic behavior, her attempts to manipulate Ethan, and her uninvited visits. I spoke from the heart, detailing how I had fought for my son since the day he was born, and how I wanted nothing more than for him to feel loved and secure. I wanted the judge to see me for who I truly was, a father who had his son's best interests at heart. As I concluded my statement, I glanced over at Sarah. Her expression was one of fury and desperation, and I knew that I had struck a nerve. I felt a sense of control wash over me. I had told my truth, and I had done it for Ethan. The judge listened intently, taking notes as I spoke. After my presentation, he allowed both lawyers to ask questions. Sarah's lawyer tried to catch me off guard, but I remained composed and focused. I was prepared for anything they would throw at me. Finally, Sarah was called to the stand. She began to spin her narrative of how I was emotionally unstable, how I had been hostile towards her since our separation. But the more she talked, the more the cracks in her story began to show. I could see the judge's expression shifting, and I seized the opportunity. "Your Honor," I interjected, I want to remind everyone that while I may have been angry about the affair, I've always prioritized Ethan's well-being. This is not about my feelings, it's about ensuring that he has stability. I've documented every instance of Sarah's behavior to illustrate how it has impacted our son. The tension in the room was palpable as I laid out my carefully curated documentation, showing evidence of Sarah's inconsistency and volatility. I watched as the judge furrowed his brow, processing the evidence I presented. After what felt like an eternity, the hearing concluded and the judge left to make his decision. I sat in silence, my heart racing as I exchanged glances with my lawyer. "You did well," she whispered, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of uncertainty. What if I had misjudged the situation? What if the judge believed Sarah's narrative? While we waited, I thought of Ethan. I wanted him to grow up feeling loved and safe, far away from the chaos of his mother's choices. I had fought hard for every moment I spent with him, and I wasn't about to let Sarah take that away from me. After a lengthy wait, the judge returned. My heart pounded in my chest as he sat down and cleared his throat. "I've considered all the evidence and testimony provided," he began, looking directly at both of us. "This is a challenging situation for all involved, especially for Ethan." He paused for a moment, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the room. I held my breath, feeling as if my entire world hung in the balance. "Given the circumstances, I am granting Jason primary custody of Ethan, with supervised visitation rights for Sarah until further review in 6 months. A rush of relief surged through me, and I had to fight back tears. I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph mixed with the knowledge that the battle was far from over. I looked over at Sarah, whose face was a mix of shock and fury. I felt a deep sense of sadness for the woman I once loved, but I couldn't let that cloud judgment. As I left the courthouse with my lawyer, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead would be difficult, especially with Sarah's unpredictable behavior, but I had secured a victory for Ethan. That evening, as I sat with him at the dinner table, I couldn't help but feel a surge of love for my son. "Ethan," I said, looking him in the eyes, "today was a big day. Things are going to be different now, but I want you to know that I love you, and I'm always going to be here for you." He smiled, blissfully unaware of the complexities of adult relationships. "I love you too, Dad," he replied, and in that moment I knew that everything I had fought for was worth it. As the days turned into weeks, I focused on creating a stable environment for Ethan. I worked hard to fill our home with love and laughter, making sure he felt safe and cherished. I could see the effects of our new arrangement starting to take shape. His laughter became more frequent, his smile brighter. Still, I remained vigilant, knowing that Sarah would continue to test boundaries. But I was ready for whatever she threw my way. I had built a solid foundation for Ethan, and no matter what, I would protect that at all costs. In the end, this journey taught me the importance of resilience, of standing up for what is right, and of the unbreakable bond between a father and his child. I may have lost the woman I once loved, but I gained something far more valuable: a deeper understanding of my role as a father and a commitment to ensuring Ethan's happiness above all else. The battle had shaped me, but it was love that would guide me forward. And with that love, I knew that I could face whatever challenges lay ahead. I was ready to embrace this new chapter of our lives, stronger and more determined than ever to be the father Ethan needed me to be.